Before we get into today's show, let me tell you about the latest deal from Mike Lindell, MyPillow. Once again, the big box stores have canceled their orders simply because they don't agree with Mike Lindell's politics. They don't like it because he supports President Trump. Well, he's going to pass that savings on to you. No more middleman. And boy, does he have some great deals on the Giza Dream Sheets and the Percal bed sheets. Listen to this. Giza Dream Queen Size, normally $139.98. Your wholesale price, $69.99 when you use promo code Joey. King size, only $79.99. The Percal Queen Size, normally $89.98. Your wholesale price, $29.98 when you use promo code Joey. Just call 1-800-893-4059 or go to MyPillow.com. Always use promo code Joey. Free shipping options available. This allotment's not going to last very long. When they're gone, they're gone. MyPillow.com, promo code Joey. Thanks for joining me in the PhD Weight Loss and Nutrition Studios. To lose weight for the last time, visit myphdweightloss.com. Welcome in as we wrap up another week. We now know the name of one of the two victims of this week's shooting in Minneapolis. His father says he will not let his son be forgotten. Newly declassified documents have stated that former President Barack Obama was present for key meetings with his top intelligence and national security officials that led to critical steps in the opening of the Trump-Russia investigation. In today's show, we take a look at what Obama knew and didn't know about the Trump-Russia probe. Lieutenant Governor Pamela Evette joins us to talk about this week's school shooting and what South Carolina is doing to keep students safe in our schools. And according to a psychologist, a South Carolina man who's a former nuclear inspector charged with threatening to kill multiple presidents is too delusional to stand trial until he receives mental health treatment. How is it we can identify this man's mental health issues prior to a crime, but we can't stop troubled young men from shooting in our schools?
I told you we'd be back.
And ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free.
It's Joey Hudson.
I wanted to name it the Joey Hudson bill, but, they don't allow you to put names on bills. But I wanted to call it the Joey Hudson bill because I know that one's been near and dear to you for a number of years.
That's how it's done. Let your voice be heard.
And the truth shall set you free.
Here's Joey Hudson.
The father of one of the two victims killed tragically this week spoke out yesterday. Jesse Merkel, the father of 8-year-old Fletcher Merkel, had this heartfelt message for people about his son.
Yesterday, a coward decided to take our 8-year-old son Fletcher away from us. Because of their actions, we will never be allowed to hold him, talk to him, play with him, and watch him grow into the wonderful young man he was on the path to becoming. Fletcher loved his family, friends, fishing, cooking, and any sport that he was allowed to play. While the hole in our hearts and lives will never be filled, I hope that in time our family can find healing. I pray that the other victim's family can find some semblance of the same. I'm hopeful that all the wounded are able to make a full recovery and return home to their families. And finally, all the people, and especially the children, impacted by this horrific event are able to recover mentally and find strength to live loving, happy, and full lives. Over the past day, I've heard many stories accounting the swift and heroic actions of children and adults alike from inside the church. Without these people and their selfless actions, this could have been a tragedy of many magnitudes more. For these people, I'm thankful. Moving forward, we ask not for your sympathy, but your empathy. As our family and the Annunciation community grieve and try to make sense of such a senseless act of violence. Please remember Fletcher for the person he was and not the act that ended his life. Give your kids an extra hug and kiss today. We love you, Fletcher. You'll always be with us.
This is a tough one, folks. It's one of those stories that makes your heart sink and your blood boil at the same time. This story started this week in Minneapolis inside of a Catholic church during Mass. This coward with 3 guns opened fire. Let me repeat that. This wasn't on some street corner at 2 in the morning. It wasn't a drug turf war. This was in a house of God during Mass with kids praying in the pews. By the time it was over, 2 children were dead, 18 others wounded. 8-year-old Fletcher Merkel was one of those. Jesse Merkel, his father, is whom you just heard. He stood before cameras broken yesterday. You can feel the pain in the words. Every parent listening knows it. Fletcher loved fishing, cooking, playing any sport he could. He was just starting life. Now he's gone because of this evil. The second child killed was 10 years old. Their name has not been released yet because the family is still reeling, as you can imagine, from the shot. And then there's the survivors. 13-year-old Andre Gunter, shot in the stomach, rushed into surgery, now recovering in a hospital bed. His mom wrote that he survived because an MPD officer hugged him, prayed with him, reassured him as he was bleeding. Think about that. In his darkest moment, a cop gave him comfort. Now, that's a hero there. 12-year-old Sophia Forchus was critically injured, underwent hours of surgery. Her little brother was inside the church too, but he wasn't hit. Her mother, a pediatric nurse, found out her own daughter was fighting for her life while she was at work saving other children. You see how these ripples out? Families torn apart, brothers and sisters traumatized, parents left in anguish, classmates wondering why their friends aren't in school today. And then we learn what the shooter left behind. Hundreds of pages of writings, obsessed with killing children. The acting U.S. attorney said it plainly. The shooter wanted nothing more than to kill children to watch them suffer. What a sick mind. This wasn't random. It wasn't spur of the moment. It was planned. It was deliberate because this young man was troubled. And those around him, did they know it? Well, how does this slip through the cracks? And we're going to talk more about that a little later in today's show. Now, here's the part that kind of makes me angry. No, it does make me angry. How does someone like this, with those kinds of writings, with that kind of obsession, slip through the cracks until the only option left is to show up after the massacre, count the bodies, and hold a press conference? How many times have we heard it? Parkland, Sandy Hook, Nashville, and now the Annunciation Catholic Church in Minneapolis. Every time after the blood is cleaned from the floor, we hear the same thing. There were warning signs. There were writings. There were online posts. Cries for help. But somehow nobody stopped them. Now, a little later in today's show, I'm going to share with you the story of a man in South Carolina who threatened President Donald Trump and former President Joe Biden. They had him in custody almost immediately. He's already been through psychiatric evaluations, already declared incompetent, already on the path to treatment. When the targets are presidents, the system seemed to work like clockwork. We're going to dive into that a little bit later. But when the targets are kids, we're told it's complicated. We're told law enforcement can't do much until after shots are fired. And then it's too late, of course. After it's too late, the politicians come out and lecture to the rest of us about gun control. Well, let me tell you something. This isn't about hunting rifles or grandpa's shotgun. This is about the same cowardly evil that has stalked every generation. And the failure of those in power to deal with it before children end up in coffins is shameless. President Trump immediately ordered all U.S. flags flown at half-staff in honor of the victims, as he should. Pope Leo sent his condolences. The mayor gave a heartfelt speech. Those gestures matter. They show respect. But I think Fletcher's father would probably trade every flag at half-staff, every Pope's blessing, every candlelight vigil just for one more night tucking his boy into bed. What he wants is what every parent wants, for this never to happen again, for it to have never happened in the first place. Think about where this happened. In a Catholic church at Mass, kids were literally praying. They were learning about faith, about friendship, about growing up in community, and that's where this monster chose to unleash violence. If that doesn't tell you that we're in a spiritual battle as much as a political one, I don't know what will. The mayor said, these kids were literally praying. They should be able to go to school or church in peace without fear, and he's right. But words aren't enough. America is in a health crisis, and by America, not just strangers across the country. It's personal. Me, you, friends, and family. And a major cause? Excess weight. Joey Hudson here. The solution isn't expensive shots like Ozempic. It's learning how to eat and think about food differently, and that's what PhD Weight Loss does. Their clients lose up to a third of their body weight, no drugs, just real food, behavioral coaching, and proven science to turn your body into a fat-burning machine. Sure, you could spend up to $20,000 a year on injections that burn muscle, not fat, and come with risks like pancreatitis or bowel blockages, only to gain it all back. PhD helps your body naturally produce weight loss hormones like GLP-1s, no shortcuts, just results that last. Already on Ozempic? Dr. Ashley Lucas and her team will help you safely transition off and keep losing weight. Let's make America healthy again. Call 864-644-1900. That's 864-644-1900 or visit myphdweightloss.com. Okay, if you have been following politics for the last 8 years or so, you already know about Russiagate, the endless drumbeat from the media, the Democrats, and even some Republicans, let's be honest here, that Donald Trump was somehow compromised by the Russians. It was on every cable show, plastered across every newspaper, whispered like gospel truth in Washington cocktail parties. But here's the thing, and we're beginning to learn more and more about what was really happening, things that we suspected but couldn't quite prove then. Newly classified documents are now shining some light on how it all really began. And surprise, surprise, it wasn't some rogue FBI lawyer or a couple of agents going off the rails. Nope, it all went all the way to the top, to President Barack Obama himself. Obama was in the room, that's right. He knew a lot of these things, and we suspected he knew. We suspected it all along, but it's becoming clearer now. So let's lay this out. In August of 2016, then CIA Director John Brennan briefed President Obama directly on intelligence that Hillary Clinton's campaign was stirring up a plan to link Trump to Russia. Brennan's own notes, which were declassified later, had POTUS scribbled in the margin. POTUS meaning, of course, President Obama. This wasn't a game of telephone. He was personally told. Barack Obama heard this from his own CIA director. Who else was in the room? Then Vice President Joe Biden, FBI Director James Comey. There's a whole list. Attorney General Loretta Lynch, Director of National Intelligence James Clapper. That's the whole Obama National Security Brain Trust at the time. And they weren't talking about ISIS or China. They were talking about Donald Trump, the person that they were fearful of, that they were convinced was probably going to beat Hillary Clinton, but they didn't want to admit it in public, and they were going to do everything they could quietly behind the scenes to stop it from happening. Now, we have since learned that Hillary Clinton allegedly approved a plan from her advisors to vilify Trump by tying him to Russia, making him look like a commie, making him look like he was best friends with Russia, with Putin. Brennan's notes spell it out. The FBI, specifically Peter Strzok, you remember him, the guy writing love notes to Lisa Page about how they had an insurance policy against Trump, opened a full-blown counterintelligence investigation just days later. It was codenamed Crossfire Hurricane. Remember that? And remember, this is late July, early August 2016. We're in the thick of it, just as Trump was pulling ahead of Hillary, just when the Democrats were realizing, hey, we may be in trouble here. Hillary may be in trouble here. What's happening? What can we do to stop this from happening? Now, former President Obama has denied that he was the so-called ringleader of Russiagate. His spokesman called the accusations ridiculous and a bizarre distraction. But here's the problem. The documents that we're seeing now tell somewhat of a different story. You don't get briefed personally on a plan to tie your opponent to Russia, attend multiple meetings about it, watch your intelligence community spin up reports, and then claim, oh, I had no idea. Sorry. Come on. We're smarter than that, aren't we? And by the way, those reports, the ones claiming Russia was actively interfering in the 2016 election. The intelligence community itself was saying privately in late 2016 that Russia probably wasn't trying to actually change votes. They said cyber actors had poked around at voter databases in Illinois and a few other states, but nothing that could flip the outcome. Yet suddenly, after a White House meeting on December the 9th, the story flipped. Obama's intel chiefs were tasked, per the president's request, we're told, to produce a brand new assessment claiming Russia was indeed meddling to hurt Hillary and to help Trump. And by January 6, 2017, right before Trump took office, the intelligence community dropped the now famous assessment that's been quoted ever since. Very convenient, huh? Very convenient how this all came about. Now, here's another twist. Declassified emails show that foreign actors tied to billionaire George Soros's Open Society Foundations were emailing back in late July 2016, days before the FBI even opened Crossfire Hurricane, talking about pushing a narrative that Trump was compromised by Russia. You got George Soros involved and the money that he could put behind something. One email actually said Hillary Clinton had approved the idea to frame Trump's ties to Russian hackers as a U.S. domestic issue. Another email said later the FBI will put more oil into the fire. Now, folks, that's not speculation. That's in black and white. You can read it. It was a political op disguised as counterintelligence. And let's not forget General Michael Flynn. Obama personally warned Trump not to hire him as a national security advisor. Trump ignored the warning, tapped Flynn, and what happened? Within weeks, Flynn was targeted by the FBI. We now know internal FBI notes ask whether the goal of Flynn's interview was to get him to lie so that we can prosecute him or get him fired. Think about that. This wasn't about truth. It was about taking out Trump's national security advisor before he could even get started. Flynn eventually pled guilty under immense pressure, only to later have the Justice Department drop the case after memos revealed that he had basically been set up in a perjury trap. But by then, the damage was done. His reputation was trashed, and the media ran with Trump advisor caught lying about Russia. Exactly what the Obama team wanted from the beginning. Now, perhaps the most telling moment came on January the 5th, 2017. Just days before Trump's inauguration, Obama gathered at Joe Biden, James Comey, Clapper, Brennan, Susan Rice, and others in the Oval Office. According to the documents, according to White House officials, they discussed whether to share sensitive Russia-related information with Trump's incoming team. Comey suggested maybe not. Susan Rice later sent herself that infamous by-the-book email documenting Obama's guidance. Why write yourself an email about a meeting unless you know you're going to need legal cover later? In that meeting, Comey even discussed Michael Flynn's calls with the Russian ambassador. Again, this was not routine. This was surveillance, intelligence gathering, high-level plotting, all aimed at the incoming Trump administration. They wanted to try to make Donald Trump fail before he even began. They couldn't stand the idea that he had beaten Hillary Clinton. And so rather than think about the success of our country, they're still trying to bring the man down after he had won the election. So let's kind of connect the dots here. We now have proof Obama was present in the meetings where the idea to tie Trump to Russia was discussed, where Brennan briefed him on Hillary's plan to vilify Trump. It's all part of a political plan, where the FBI was spinning up Crossfire Hurricane, where the intelligence assessments were suddenly rewritten to point at Russian interference, where all this was cooked up, and where Flynn was singled out as a problem. And yet, Obama's defenders still claim this was all business as usual. No political motives here, just protecting democracy. Really? They think we believe that? Because it looks a lot more like the sitting president of the United States at the time was weaponizing the intelligence community against a political rival. Does it look like that to you? If a Republican president had done this, if Donald Trump had done this, the media would have called it Watergate times 10, Watergate on steroids. There would have been nonstop hearings, primetime specials, probably impeachment again. Instead, The press gave Obama cover. And President Trump got branded as a Russian asset for the first 3 years of his presidency, and it was a distraction the whole time. Imagine what he could have accomplished in that first term had he not had this distraction. Just imagine that for a moment, because he got a lot accomplished even with the distraction. Donald Trump has said from day one that this was a witch hunt, a hoax. He called it treason. He said Obama and his people were behind it. And now, piece by piece, little by little, day by day, declassified documents are showing he was right once again. And that's the real takeaway here. The people who screamed the loudest about protecting democracy were actually the very ones trying to undermine it. They tried to rig the narrative in 2016 to kneecap Donald Trump before he even got to the Oval Office, and then hound him with investigations for years during his presidency. This is bigger than Donald Trump. This is bigger than Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump. This is about trust. Can Americans trust their intelligence agencies if they're willing to be turned into political weapons, as they were? Can we trust the press if they act as stenographers for one party's talking points? And can we trust that our elections are fair when the sitting president and his allies are playing games behind the scenes? Just what can we trust, and when, and who? Those are the questions that we need to be asking as these documents come out, because the truth is simple. Russiagate wasn't just a dirty trick. It was the biggest political hit job in American modern history. And if Barack Obama, his fingerprints are all over it, he needs to be held responsible. Folks, as we wrap up another week on this Friday, and boy, it's been a fast week. Glad to be back with you after having been gone last week on our Patriots Alaska cruise. I came back with a little congestion and all, and so I appreciate you bearing with me. My voice has just been kind of rough this week. But as we wrap up this week, let me walk you through a story that at first glance sounds like something out of a Netflix thriller, maybe. A former nuclear inspector from right here in South Carolina, a man named Travis Lang, has been charged with threatening to kill multiple presidents. Not just one, not just Trump, not just Biden. No, he threatened to kill them both, President Trump and former President Joe Biden, their vice presidents, even state officials here in South Carolina. He posted on social media that he would execute them for what he called abuse and misuse of office. Now, the kicker here, a federal psychologist testified this week that this guy, Travis Lang, is too delusional to stand trial. He's been diagnosed with a delusional disorder, says he's the victim of a government conspiracy, claims he has secret knowledge about the nuclear plant fiasco at VC Summer, that $1 billion plus government boondoggle down there. He even says he knows hidden details about January the 6th. He mutters about treason, racketeering, extortion, and believes his own defense attorneys and the judge are part of the conspiracy against him. You kind of get the picture here? So what happens? Well, instead of facing justice, the court system may declare him incompetent and ship him off to a psychiatric treatment center until he's stable enough to stand trial. Now, don't get me wrong here. If the guy really is mentally ill, of course he needs treatment. But here's where I think every American ought to be scratching their head. When it's a threat against a president, when the Secret Service gets involved, when the FBI steps in, suddenly we're laser focused. Suddenly the government can identify the suspect, track his online post, put him behind bars, get him in front of a judge, run him through evaluations. They've got the system running like a Swiss watch. But here's my question. Why can't we have that same sense of urgency when it comes to the safety of our kids in schools? This week, after another shooting involving another school and 2 innocent lives taken. Think about it. Time after time, we hear after a school shooting, oh, yes, law enforcement had been warned about this individual. Oh, yes, there was disturbing social media posts. Oh, yes, people around him said that he was troubled. Sometimes there were even prior arrests, sometimes even psychiatric evaluations or police visits to the home. But somehow they slipped through the cracks. And the end result? families destroyed, children dead, teachers murdered, communities ripped apart. Why is it that a guy like this Travis Lang guy can be tracked down, arrested, declared incompetent in federal court before he ever pulls a trigger? But a disturbed teenager, a disturbed young man who thinks he's a young girl with a mile-long social media trail of threats can walk right into a school or stand outside of a school and shoot into it. Is this a double standard, or am I just totally off base here? I mean, let's look at this. When the target is the political class, when the threat is against the president, the vice president, or sitting governor, and look, I'm not saying that these people aren't important. They should be protected. We all should be protected. But in these cases, somehow the system mobilizes like it's the Super Bowl. The full weight of the federal government comes crashing down on the suspect. They track your tweets. They knock on your door. They haul you in front of a judge. They run psychological evaluations until the cows come home. But when the target is ordinary Americans, kids in schools, people in grocery stores, churchgoers in a Bible study, suddenly we're told, well, there's not much we can do until they actually commit a crime. Suddenly we have all these hand-wringing explanations about privacy law, civil liberties, due process, and how hard it is to predict violence. You see where I'm headed with this? You see the conundrum here? And I'm sorry, but that doesn't just cut it anymore. If you can intervene for threats against the political elite, why can't we intervene for threats against school children? Why can't we anticipate those? Now, back to this Lane guy. He filed as a Republican presidential candidate in 2024, though he never paid the actual fee to get on the ballot. His entire campaign war chest was about $6,000 of his own money, and he spent about half of it, according to public records. Hardly a serious campaign. But in his mind, he was destined to be president. And anyone who got in his way, Donald Trump, Joe Biden, Mike Pence, Kamala Harris, well, he claimed that he'd execute them. He threatened to kill them. The psychologist testified that Mr. Lang does understand how the legal system works in theory. He knows what judges and attorneys are supposed to do. But when it comes to his own case, he insists that everyone is part of a grand conspiracy against him. That's the delusion. That's why they say he can't help his lawyers prepare a defense of himself. He even muttered in court in his orange jumpsuit about hidden murders and extortion schemes. He believes the government is out to silence him because of what he knows. Now, again, clearly, this man is unstable. I'm not challenging that. But here's the irony. The same system that couldn't stop school shooters in Uvalde or Parkland or Nashville or in Minneapolis this week somehow managed to stop Travis Lane before he ever got close to carrying out his threats. And thank goodness they did. Why can't we use that same sense of urgency, though, to protect kids in school, to protect worshipers in a church, to protect shoppers in a shopping mall? This shows us something. It shows us that when the system wants to act, maybe it can act. It can find people online making threats. It can investigate. It can intervene. It can put them into treatment. But too often that urgency only exists when it's the president's life on the line, not when it's school kids sitting in classrooms. Am I off base here? Am I overreacting? I would ask the question, why is that? I think it comes down to priorities. The political elite take care of themselves, but the everyday American, the single mom sending her kids to school in the morning, the community pastor leading a Wednesday night prayer group, maybe they're vulnerable when they shouldn't be. And then when tragedy strikes, politicians stand up in front of cameras and say, well, we need more gun control, which we see from the Democrats, from the left. That's their immediate response. That's their knee-jerk reaction. There's no mention of the dozens of missed warning signs, no mention of the fact that the shooter in this week's case was a troubled young man. Again, a man who thought he thinks he's a young girl. No mention of the system's failure to act. And I got to believe that as we continue to uncover information about this young man this week, it wasn't a secret that he was troubled. It wasn't a secret that he had issues. And there was certainly a lot of information that he had. I can't imagine how his parents weren't aware of it. Now, here's another angle. The system has a legal standard. You can't stand trial if you don't understand the charges or can't help your lawyers. That's the bar. So back to Travis Lang. Lang may be medicated until he's stable, and then maybe he'll face trial. But what about all the young men who are competent but still dangerous? They're often labeled as disturbed or loners, but they're not so delusional that they can't stand trial. They know that what they're doing, they plan it, they brag about it online, they leave manifestos, and yet they're allowed to roam free until they pull the trigger. If we can force treatment for a man who threatens politicians, why can't we require intervention for someone who threatens mass violence at a school? The bottom line is we've seen proof that the government can act decisively to stop threats before blood is spilled. The question is, why don't they show that same determination when it comes to protecting the rest of us, and particularly our kids in school? Your comments are welcome on the Furman Ford text line, 864-477-JOEY. That's 864-477-5639. Email's always welcome, joey@joeyhudson.com. Speaking of the Furman Ford text line, it's never been more important to support locally run businesses owned by people who actually live here in the upstate. Let me take a minute to talk with you about our friends at Furman Ford. If you're looking for a new vehicle, maybe a great pre-owned vehicle, one you can trust, or maybe you're looking to order that special vehicle. Either way, if you want a new one, a brand new one, or a pre-owned that you can trust, the folks at Furman Ford, they're there to help you. Their name is on the sign because their name is on the line, because every single transaction is important to them. Jim Furman, Matthew Furman. They do business the right way. When you stop by, when you give them a call, or maybe when you just send them a quick email, you're always going to have access to a member of the Furman Ford family. And by the way, they also offer great service, and you're not going to have to wait weeks and weeks to get it done. And you do not have had to purchase your vehicle at Furman Ford. Doesn't even have to be a Ford. They service all makes and models. Visit my friends at Furman Ford online at furmanford.com, furmanford.com. Joining me on our guest line, Pamela Evette, Lieutenant Governor of South Carolina. How are you? Welcome.
I'm doing good, Joey. I hope you're doing well.
I am wonderful. Sorry I missed you last week, but of course, on the Patriots Alaska cruise I tell you should have been with us, because you talk about, we had just over 400 Patriots from all around the country, and you talk about people who were enthusiastic for President Donald Trump, for MAGA, for America First, and just who loved our country. We had that group in Alaska last week.
That's wonderful. And, you see more and more of that. Like people, like I was watching Fox News this morning before I got on with you, and, they were in Tennessee and Nashville, and they were asking people, are you happy with what President Trump is doing? And one gentleman said, yes, I voted for law and order.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
He's doing exactly what he said he was going to do. And another one said, promises made, promises kept. He's keeping the promises he made. And that's what people want, right? They just want somebody that has the know-how to do the job, and they can get in there and do it, and just be unapologetic about being pro-American, pro-farmer, pro-American farmer, pro-American business. It's refreshing, and the new statistics that are coming out are saying that in general the public wants exactly what the president is doing.
Right.
And so I think we're turning more people MAGA, right? More people are seeing that you can really get things done if you have a strong leader in office. So you keep going, President Trump. We're all standing behind you.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the American people, they're ready for a stronger economy, for energy independence. And, again, after yesterday's tragedy, 2 children killed, 17 injured, the American people just want to feel safe. And we're not feeling that. Another shooting by another very troubled young man. And the Democrats, again, are blaming the guns.
Well, I first of all, I think we need to keep all the children, especially the families of the ones that were killed, but just think of the horrible burden and weight that all the children in that church yesterday are going to carry for years to come. And so praying for them and for their families, because I can't imagine, Joey, being a mom, my kids all went to Catholic school. It's just astonishing to me that in this era, we're seeing such rises in anti-Semitism. And, they're calling this a hate crime targeted at Catholics. you're seeing these things that are just, it's like, what is happening? You know, the left wants us to be tolerant of everyone except people who believe in God and family and country.
Yes.
And you know, it's when you sit back and you look at it, you just have to take a pause and say, what is happening?
And yesterday, Governor McMaster, you guys announced that funding for an armed, certified, full-time school resource officer for every school in South Carolina has been secured for this school year. I mean, this should give parents in South Carolina some peace of mind sending their children to school, right?
Absolutely. You know, this is something that the governor and I have been fighting for. You know, we have to keep our kids safe. We have to make sure that during the school day, the kids feel safe so that they can concentrate on studying. Parents need to know that their kids are safe so they can be at work doing what they have to do to support their families. And that's why we felt it was so important, you know, really worked with the General Assembly to get that done this year. And you know, you don't get a do-over when these things happen. And we saw that yesterday. I wish, we should have, we could have, it goes right out the window. And so, you know, it's, you know, you hear it on the news, you know, since the shooting yesterday, you have all these experts on that are calling these, you know, churches are targets, all these, you know, soft targets, they call them. There has to be security. And, you know, that gets hard, but you see it more and more that churches on Sunday have some form of security around the church.
Right.
Because you just never know. And we have to start calling these things out, Joey. You said it, you know, right away, everybody wants to blame the gun. No, we need to blame the troubled youth that our society is really now turning a blind eye to. You know, these kids, this is now the second time, you know, I think it was in Tennessee, we had the first trans school shooter, and that kind of disappeared. Like it happened, it came up for a minute, and then it was almost like it was gone and nobody talked about it. And now this one, I mean, you know, we're seeing more and more reports coming out about how, you know, this gender dysphoria is a mental illness. And we need to be looking at it as that if we want to fix the root cause to these problems.
Yeah.
And, you know, I hope this is a wake-up call, that this idea of like giving in to this and just accepting it and being vigilant, right? Like, you know, the First Lady gave an amazing statement about how we have to be vigilant in our homes, we have to be vigilant in schools, and we have to be vigilant on social media. You know, it was kind of like after 9/11. If you see something, say something.
Yeah.
You know, we can't take threats that people make anymore for granted and just kind of slough them off and act like it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, yeah. Lieutenant Governor Pamela Evette with me today, and you're so right. Mental health. I listened to some of the Democrat leaders yesterday, like Senator Schumer, like Hakeem Jeffries, and all they spoke about were the guns, and they never mentioned mental health. And it's very clear to me, in what little information we have so far, this young man had mental health issues.
Oh, yeah. I think, you know, the more and more that's going to come out, and I'm sure we'll find out more and more in the days to come, obviously mental health issues. You can't be in your right mind and do something heinous like that. I think that goes without saying. But you're right. Right away, they want to jump on the soapbox of guns. And, you know, Triple J, I was at an event he was at speaking for veterans in Horry County just a few weeks ago. And he brought up this great point. He's like, you know, in New York, you know, New York has some of the strictest gun laws. And he said, but they will arrest somebody that has an illegal weapon on them and then let them out with no cash bail.
Right. Yeah.
You know, it's like, so you're just letting them back out into the street. If they got a gun illegally once, they'll get a gun illegally again, and there's no consequences.
Yeah.
So they're punishing the gun and not the person who's going in and actually breaking the law. It doesn't make any sense. Yeah. And that's why, you know, we can bring it full circle to the beginning. Thank God for President Trump, who's now drawing a line in the sand and saying, we're not going to have these cashless bails anymore. And we are going to have law and order in our streets, and people need to feel safe walking out of their homes, and he's going to make sure it gets done. And thank you to him.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Lieutenant Governor Pamela Evette, always a pleasure. Have a wonderful and safe day.
You too, Joey. I hope you feel better.
Thank you. That's it for today's edition of Just the Truth. Thanks for joining me in the PhD Weight Loss Studios. To lose weight for the last time, visit myphdweightloss.com. If you haven't joined my mailing list yet, visit my website, joeyhudson.com. Click on the Connect with Joey button so that you can receive our emails and the most up-to-date news. Also, join me on my YouTube channel. Be sure and like, comment, and subscribe. Just search for Joey Hudson. As always, thanks for spending a few minutes of your day with me. Do me a favor and forward this episode to a few friends. Just click on the share button and send to your contacts. We need to build an army of conservatives to win our country back, and we can do that by continuing to share the truth with our friends and family. Keep those comments coming via the Furman Ford text line 864-477-JOEY. Email to joey@joeyhudson.com, and I love your messages on the MyPillow message line. Again, that's 864-477-JOEY, 864-477-5639. Be sure and take advantage of the MyPillow special, just $14.88 on the standard MyPillows when you use promo code Joey. Order online at mypillow.com or call 800-893-4053. We're back again tomorrow and hope you'll plan to join us. Until then, remember, God's got this. He's still in control.